Hi, everyone. Thought we needed a little bit of soothing music this morning to start the broadcast. Hi, welcome. I want to do a big initial shout out to our audience members, particularly our regulars who are in Maine. We have several people who are in Lewiston or nearby towns, and I just want to send you all some love. And we're going to talk about all of this in the kind of larger context today, including the Speaker of the House election and Trump's ongoing incitements and everything else. But first and foremost, I just want to say to our friends in Maine that I am holding you in my heart, and I know that there are people in our community because some of our friends over on the Patreon subscription feed have mentioned that they've already lost people, that they know people who were murdered last night. So just want to make sure that we're all taking a moment to kind of, and I know it's very hard not to, right? I'm like preaching to the choir here with all of you, but I want you all to know that I'm holding you close, and I know this community is holding all of you close, and sending you all just an enormous amount of love. Okay, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. This is Resistance Live. I am coming to you, as always, from occupied Tongva land here in Southern California. For our visually disabled viewers, today I'm wearing a gray wool sweater with a slight collar on it. It's ribbed. I have my hair down today, dirty blonde hair, pink skin, green eyes. I'm wearing a little bit of a pink lipstick, and I'm in my office with a big old green plant behind me and a lamp and a chair. And my pronouns are she, her. Okay, so we did have just a kind of like shared outpouring of horror and grief and upset this morning over on the Patreon feed for those of you who are subscribers over there. And there have been press conferences ongoing all morning about the shootings in Lewiston, Maine. To clarify where we are now, the shootings took place at 2 locations. As of right now, there are 18 confirmed dead and 13 injured. The shooter is still unaccounted for. And there's a lot of speculation this morning about, from FBI profilers and the like on the news about whether or not it's likely that he has committed suicide or is lying in wait. He's obviously hiding somewhere if he's still alive. And so much of that region of Maine is still currently on lockdown. The schools are closed. Businesses are closed, and people are asking to shelter in place with their doors locked. Obviously, the FBI is involved, as well as an enormous amount of local and state law enforcement. So hopefully we will have some resolution on that soon. I was asked why it is, and I just wanted to explain this, even though the person who asked it said this after the fact, that they realized why this was the case, but I wanted to address it for the larger audience here. Why it was that under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was passed in 2022, this person who had a long-standing mental health history, had made prior threats against a military base located in Maine, had raised concerns about his own mental health, had been allowed to obtain an AR. Or any other gun. And I unfortunately have to report to you that what happened in the negotiation stages of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was that certain folks refused to vote for it if the background check extended to adults. And so the background check under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act only extends to buyers of guns under the age of 21. I can't even believe I have to say that out loud. And it did close the boyfriend loophole, meaning that if you have been convicted of domestic violence, you're not allowed to obtain a firearm, but only for 5 years. Other than that, it allocated $15 billion to school security and mental health. But I have to remind everyone that gun legislation in this country is still handled very much at the state level, and Maine has no gun control. None. There is concealed carry. There are no background checks. There's no limitations on who's allowed to obtain a gun. And so this entire situation is an example of why we need additional gun safety legislation And just for starters, because really it would only just be for starters, the return of an assault weapons ban. I was asked on the Patreon feed this morning what more we can do about this. And, the recommendations that I have for folks in Maine are that you call your representatives and your senators. Angus King is not a big fan of gun safety legislation, notwithstanding the fact that he caucuses with the Democrats as an independent. You have the ability to pick up the phone and make your voice heard. And I would encourage you to do that today. I also want folks to understand, though, that passing an assault weapons ban is not going to happen while the House of Representatives is controlled by the Republicans. And we're going to talk about the election of Mike Johnson yesterday. But I do want people to be very, very clear at this point that all of this is on the hands of the GOP, and it has been for a very long time. Notwithstanding the fact that there's new reporting this morning that the NRA is in financial freefall, we know that the NRA has been one of the biggest donors to Republican candidates. And we also know that Russian money was funneled through the NRA to donate to Republican candidates in enormous numbers. And again, this is part of the problem with dark money being allowed into politics through the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court. But the NRA, until very recently, was the most powerful lobby in Washington. And they essentially bought and paid for an enormous number of GOP senators and representatives to ensure that no gun safety legislation would be passed. This is their fault. This is their fault. And I want to be really clear about it. I lay blame at the foot of the party that has stood in the way of saving the lives of children bowling on a Wednesday night in a bowling alley in Maine, right? Or people who are just out having a drink at their local bar. That's not on the person who did it. It's on the fact that we're the only major country in the world where someone with a serious mental health history can walk into a gun shop and buy a rifle that can kill more people in the space of 2 hours than died in the entire state last year. There's only one party that's responsible for that. And it's infuriating and very upsetting. And I understand why people feel like this is dire. And yes, as folks are pointing out in the comments, let's not forget that Donald Trump, when he was president, rolled back an Obama-era prohibition on people with mental illness histories. There were regulations that made it harder for them to purchase a gun. Trump eliminated those. So we all know where the issue lies. And I very much just want everyone to understand that that all of this is one major reason why we have got to take back the House in 2024. Like, if it wasn't clear to you already, and I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir in this audience because I know you all are out there doing the work, and you have been out there doing the work now for a very long time. But it is more important than it has ever been that we take back the House, increase our lead in the Senate, and reelect Joe Biden. Because any other outcome is going to be disastrous on this issue and a whole host of other ones. I want to just talk for a minute about maybe more than a minute about Mike Johnson's election yesterday as Speaker of the House. So Johnson is a far-right ideologue, and many people have asked me, like, how did he get all these votes, and why was people on CNN out there saying that he was a reasonable candidate? Well, I think part of what happened here is that a lot of people really weren't paying attention to who Mike Johnson is. And that is probably because, unlike people like Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan, he has not been out there screaming about the stuff that he believes in on television stations and Steve Bannon's podcast and Newsmax in the same way that some of the other people who are ideologically aligned with him have been. He's been quieter, but just as deadly. And there is footage out there of him saying that if women would just birth more babies to keep the capitalist machine running, I talked about this yesterday, then the Republicans could roll back Social Security and Medicare. There's statements out there about how he thinks homosexuality is like akin to bestiality and against nature and will cause the downfall of democracy. He's voted against funding for Ukraine. He's voted against gay marriage. He's opposed to birth control. Okay. And I do want to mention a couple of other things that are really key here, because I know that it's very hard to manage, I want to talk about this more toward the end of the broadcast, but manage like the panic here. Okay. So I have to remind you all that nothing gets passed into law in the United States of America without both the House of Representatives and the Senate passing it, and then it being signed by the president. If the president vetoes it, you need a 2/3 majority in both the Senate and the House to override the veto. The Republicans do not have that. They don't have any of it. Okay. So Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House, is not going to be able to pass a nationwide abortion ban, right? Even though that's what he wants, right? He's signaled that. He's not going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to outlaw birth control, okay? So I do need people to understand that, notwithstanding the fact that he is a very, very scary character, he can't actually get anything done right now. And it is an indication of how far right the GOP has gone. It doesn't change anything that I've been saying here for like the last almost 7 years about the fact that the GOP is a rising fascist movement. In fact, it confirms all of that. Okay. But it also doesn't change the fact that we're not in a position where a lone MAGA Speaker of the House is going to be able to overthrow American democracy. And let me clarify one other thing here. We've talked on the broadcast in the last few days about the issue of the certification of the election in 2024. So I went and researched all of this morning because I was concerned about it myself, right? And one of the things that I think had slid under the radar because of everything having to do with the insurrection itself is that the new Congress in 2021 was seated on January 3rd, okay? That was Nancy Pelosi's House of Representatives. It was seated on January 3rd. We've all seen the footage of Nancy Pelosi and like how rock solid, ice cold she was on that day and trying to keep people safe. That is because historically, and this will be the case in 2025, the new Congress is sat on January 3rd. Okay. So there's not going to be any likelihood here that Mike Johnson is going to be able to stop the certification of the 2024 election. And this is not a situation where we have a Republican vice president who is going to be threatened, cajoled, threatened with hanging if he doesn't do the right thing. The vice president who will be certifying the election results in 2025 will be Kamala Harris. So folks need to get very grounded in the fact that even though this is obviously a terrible development for the need for the passage of legislation to improve the lives of everyday Americans. And literally, we're probably going to be in a situation where we're going to be on the verge of government collapse again in like 17 days. So actually, it's like 21. 21 days is when the new, the budget resolution that extended the deadline comes up to pass. All right. But I do want people to really understand that this is, again, I have to say this is one of the reasons why this broadcast is here, because I don't want people to unnecessarily panic. I want to share information that keeps you grounded about the reality of what we're facing with no gaslighting whatsoever. But I also don't want people to be in a state of like fight or flight response all the time about things that really are not under threat. Okay. So the results of the 2025 election are going to be, 2024 election are going to be certified on January 6, 2025 by Kamala Harris in a House that if we win will be under Democratic control. Again, I have to say, if it has not been clear to you until now why it is so important that we flip the House back to blue in 2024, I hope it is now. Okay. Now, I do think that this is going to mean essentially like gridlock in Washington for the next couple of years. And, there are already implications coming to bear on what I have referred to as moderate Republicans. Again, I have to say this every time. There are no officially moderate Republicans. What I mean when I say that is Republicans who were elected from districts that Biden won in 2020. Those folks are already feeling backlash in their districts. And there's a tremendous opportunity to flip those seats blue. In fact, I think like the train to taking back the House runs right through those districts. And, one of those districts, by the way, is George Santos's. He's being arraigned tomorrow for crimes. I think there's a real need at this point to really start mobilizing to flip the seats that we know we can flip blue immediately. And Mark Elias and the ACLU are doing enormous amounts of great work right now to attack gerrymandering in states that are trying, like North Carolina, that are trying to force more Republican districts into play. I'm not sure that those efforts are going to succeed. We've seen what happened in Alabama. We've seen what is likely to happen in places like Louisiana. I think we're going to end up in a situation here where in New York, even, there's going to be a stronger likelihood of us picking up some seats. We're also going to pick up some seats here in California. But I do very much want people to understand that, you know, the House and increasing our lead in the Senate and reelecting Joe Biden is really where it's at. Because, you know, again, I feel like I've said this in every major election, whether midterm or not, since before the 2016 election, for those of you who were following me all the way back then. And I really just, I can't emphasize enough that this is really like a turning point for the nation. And if you have never volunteered for a campaign or an issue, you need to actually do it now. And, you know, if you can't leave your house, you can still make a difference. If you're somebody who is, you know, disabled or you're immune compromised and you don't want to go out and be face to face with people who aren't wearing masks, write postcards to voters from your own home, text bank from your couch. There are so many great organizations here. And, you know, I have to shout out, you know, Moms Demand in every town are the ones that come to mind this morning, but I'm just going to list off some that you all could get involved in here. Okay. There's Leaders We Deserve, David Hogg's organization for Gen Z. Voters for Tomorrow, which is Santiago Meyer's organization for Gen Z. There's Red, Wine, and Blue, which is made up of suburban moms who are out there fighting back against the fascist organization Moms for Liberty and really have done an incredible amount of work in Ohio, for instance, is only one example in terms of issue 1 and getting abortion rights into the Ohio Constitution. There are organizations like Indivisible, which are there. I mean, they're all over the country. And I interviewed Leah Greenberg last year on my podcast, and they are re-strategizing. We have Indivisible regional organizers in this community right now. They do great work. Yes, the chapters vary from location to location, but that is one option. There's Voto Latino, which organizes Latino voters. There's Black Voters Matter, run by my friend Latasha Brown, does incredible work. They're on the road right now all over the South. There's organizations like the Native American Voters Fund for people who are interested in indigenous voting rights. There's AAPI Vote, which is an organization for Asian and Pacific Islander Americans to get involved in getting out the vote in their own communities. There's plenty of organizations out there on various issues that are doing great work. Human Rights Campaign Fund does work on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community. Lambda Legal Defense is doing an enormous amount of work in terms of LGBTQ rights in the courts. And that's leaving aside all the great candidates that you can get behind, right? These are just some examples. Swing Left is another one. Sister District, which allows people in blue districts to adopt red districts to try to flip them blue. And if you want to run for office, there's Run for Something. There's Emerge, which has for 20 years been working to get women elected, blue and progressive women elected in red states. So many incredible organizations. New Georgia Project, thank you. The States Project. Again, these are organizations that are doing incredible work on behalf of our democracy. Working Families Party, which I also have mentioned here so many times. Mo Mitchell is someone who I know very well from my own work on Malcolm Kenyatta's campaign. Nalini Stamp, who is their head organizer, is an incredible activist. I am a member of the Working Families Party Coalition here in California. They're the best people I know here in the region in which I live. So it's really important that we all get very much involved right now. And you can go back and listen to this if you want to hear what those organizations are. But I cannot emphasize enough that you need to get involved in some form of organizing where you live. And these organizations will train you to do it, okay? They will help you learn how to do it if you've never done it before. And they are places where also you will meet like-minded people. You will be in community with great minds who are fighting for the same causes. And, you know, we have a desperate need right now to be working across movements and across issues and across identities to actually save the nation. So I want people, yes, Emerge is in blue states now too, but it began as an effort to get women elected in red states. Democrats abroad. Yes, thank you for that reminder, because we have such an enormous viewership here outside of the United States. If you are a U.S. citizen living abroad, and I have to shout out our friends in Bangkok and in Sweden and in Costa Rica, and, you know, our regular viewers who are dialing in from Brittany, in France, if you are an American living abroad, please get involved in Democrats abroad where you live. Now, I have to say one other thing about this, and then we're going to get on to what happened yesterday with Trump in New York State Court, and also what's happening in front of Judge Chutkin right now. I also have to implore you implore you, as I always do on this broadcast, but it's really, really important right now, do not neglect what is happening at the local and state level where you live, because gun laws are passed at the state level again. Okay. You have to know who's running for office, where you live. You have to understand that there is a pipeline of fascist candidacies right now that is running right through local school boards. People who have been supported by fascist organizations like Moms for Liberty are running for school board, and then they're running for city council, and then they're running for mayor, and then they're running for the state house or the state senate, okay? People need to get really clear on the fact that local elections are where these candidates are seated. And so if you don't stop someone in their tracks at the very beginning of that process, you're missing a chance to kind of like influence the way your state is like legislated going forward, and sometimes the country. All right. So I very much want to encourage people to kind of get involved. Yes, the Poor People's Campaign is another one. So, I have to say to people, because, sometimes I get messages from you all. I had one forwarded to me by the team this morning by someone who was like, lots of us are involved in our own area and, we're feeling despair. What do we do? So what I have to remind you about all of this is that, part of our job as organizers, and I'm speaking here right now to people who are very much like in the work already. All right. One of the things that you really need to do, and this is one reason why the work that I do as a leadership consultant and the work that I do politically as an activist and an organizer, they intersect so well. All right. Because you have an obligation, if you're somebody who really cares, to not just do that work, but also to step up and lead it. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you have an obligation to your own communities to remind people that they are part of the solution, to keep people's chins up, right? To celebrate small victories, to share truthful information with them, to make sure that you, even on your darkest days when you need to take a break, and this was the last thing I posted on Threads last night, like it's okay to log off. If you are overwhelmed, if you can't handle your emotions right now, if what you're watching on CNN or MSNBC is too much, it's okay to turn it off. The news is still going to be there, right? I know that those of you, and I'm not meaning to discount those of you who are in Maine, who have family in Maine, obviously you have a reason to be online 24/7 after an event like this. I just want to tell people though, that like part of our work is not just about ourselves. It's about everyone around us and the people in our own communities. Okay. And one of the things that I do here, right, and that I hope to model to everyone who's in this audience, and I've really tried to do this very much over the last 7 years. Sometimes I've been better at it than others. But one thing that I've really, really tried to do here is to remind you all that the solution lies with us, right? Because there are more of us in this country than there are in this tiny, what is essentially a tiny marginalized fraction of fascists, okay? Again, I have to remind you, 20% of the country is hardcore in the Trump cult. They are unreachable, okay? But if every person who aligns in any way, shape, or form, you don't have to be a hard leftist, you don't have to be a socialist, you don't even have to be someone who aligns with every progressive in Congress. But if you are aligned by more than 25% with any kind of democratic ideal, we want to get you out to vote. And if that happens, we don't lose. We don't lose on anything. Okay? And so one of the things that I just have to emphasize here is that when you are terrified, and I understand why people are terrified right now, part of your obligation to yourself, and not just to yourself, but to everyone you love and care about, is to manage your own trauma response so that you can keep going, right? This is one reason why on this broadcast we have talked so much over the last almost 7 years about how to cope with trauma, whether that's trauma historically in your own life, the trauma of what we are witnessing in the country, epigenetic and intergenerational trauma for those of us who are descended from people who have been persecuted or who have witnessed trauma in our family lines, which is like pretty much everyone, right? It's one reason why it's so key to not engage in the cycle of the news that is disabling to our ability to carry on. All right. And so my best advice to all of you right now is to remember that there is power in organizing people. Okay. That is how we get through this and how it gets better. And you cannot organize and lead people, whether it's like 5 people who are advocating in front of your own school board, or whether you're the mayor of Fairport, New York. Hello, Julie. I love you. You cannot organize people if you yourself are incapacitated by the news cycle. We have an incredible obligation right now to keep going, right? Not just even for our nation, but for the world. And I have to say that I know that everything that we are witnessing in the news cycle comes on top of everything that we've been witnessing for the last few weeks in Israel and Palestine. And it is so easy to become overwhelmed. It's so easy to get terrified especially when you have a few folks out there claiming that, because of a random campus protest and, one unaffiliated with the Black Voters Matter Maine organizing structure, condemning, saying nobody's ever going to vote for Joe Biden again, or someone saying that, Democrats are going to lose all Jewish people for a generation. I mean, I just have to say, everyone should take those opinions with a grain of salt. And I say that even though some of them are coming out of the mouths of people that I have worked with and that I know very well. I think that, the reality of where we are right now is that everybody is experiencing trauma, and most of us are doing our very best to hold space for solutions and to hold space for an end to violence and to hold space for peace, whether that's here at home or abroad. And I think that we have a job as advocates and organizers and activists to make sure this democracy is not just saved, but functions at a higher level than it's ever functioned before. And the way that we do that is to continue moving forward and taking care of ourselves so that we are capable of leading others in the right direction. And I say this so very much for everyone here who I know has been doing this work with us and alongside us for the last 7 years, right? You all are people who are primed at this point to be leaders in your own community for democracy and for justice and for equity and for safety and for peace. And if you have not stepped up at that point now, this is your moment. Okay. And you have to understand, and I am speaking from my own experience here, that if you do not attend to your own mental health, if you do not set boundaries around how you consume news, if you do not have filters about where you are getting your information from and who you are allowing to influence you, and whether or not you're going to engage with that one random troll who has 7 followers, who's an asshole, pardon my French, if you don't have limits around those things, you will not be able to do the work that we all desperately need you to do and that we all need to do in community. So it's really important to take the break, to manage your own anxiety and your own trauma, to rest, okay? To disengage when you know you need to, because the news isn't going to stop. Like, you're going to be able to go get everything that you would have been looking at already 5 hours from now or tomorrow, all right? And then remember that our obligation to one another as human beings is to try to move the needle forward. And I have to say here, sorry, sometimes I cry on the broadcast. I have to say that to all our new viewers. I take all of this very personally. It's very emotional to me because I've been doing this work since I was like 15 years old. And some of this work very directly implicates members of my own family and my own children. And so I care very, very, very deeply about these issues. All right. But I just have to say that, I look around at where we are right now, and I am reminded all the time of the words of people like Fannie Lou Hamer and James Baldwin. I'm actually reading Eddie Glaude's book, Begin Again, about James Baldwin right now. I started reading it again. I read like the first half of it when it came out a few years ago, and I'm reading it again right now. And, the thing about the great civil rights leaders and change agents who came before us, the incredible ancestors on whose shoulders we stand, is that they understood that the work had to continue, even if they weren't going to see the outcome that they were aiming for in their own lifetimes. And that is what we have to do as well. The victories will be there. They may not be as big as what we wanted or what we hoped for, but it doesn't diminish the value of the work. And I myself was awake at 3:00 this morning thinking about issues of integrity and the importance of continuing to do this work, and how I want to look back on my own life when I'm done. And I know a lot of you share this, right? I want to be sure that I have done everything I can to make the world and this country, such as it is, a better place for future generations, for my children, for the people that I care about, for every marginalized person who is under threat. I will not be done until my dying day, because my obligation to the greater good of humanity is something I carry in my heart and that I have never lost. I think I was born with it. And I know many of you share that. So I very much want you to kind of focus hard right now on the importance of managing your own responses, and then the importance of carrying on the work. Because there are so many people in this community who so desperately need, to show others how to do it, because so many people are in despair, and you all have the capacity to do it. I know you all. I know you all, right? Some of you have been sitting here with me since it was 2,000 people on my Facebook feed in late 2016 and early 2017, right? Some of you have been following me since I was just talking to my friends. And at this moment, you're the people who you're empowered with every skill set that you need to get up and keep going when you're ready, and to show others how to do it. And we all need to do it where we live, and for everybody that we love and care about, and for everyone who can't. Okay. So, that's my discussion for today, which I was going to save for the end, but I ended up being important to do it in the middle. So let's just talk about what's happening with Trump. Cause I know there are a lot of questions about it. Let me turn first to Jack Smith's opposition to the stay of the gag order in Judge Chutkan's courtroom, because this was filed last night, right around the same time that the news was breaking of the shootings in Lewiston. And it slipped under the radar for absolutely understandable reasons. But last night, Jack Smith's team filed this opposition, and it is scathing hot. It says that not just that the gag order needs to be immediately reinstated, but it cites the fact that Trump was sanctioned once in New York and didn't stop, was sanctioned again yesterday in New York after not stopping again. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And that it not only asks for the gag order to be reinstated, justifies all the reasons why the gag order is needed. It quotes Trump's recent statements about Mark Meadows, which is witness intimidation, and it asks for this is the most significant part. It asks for a modification of his conditions of release so that the terms of a federal statute. Okay, so I'm going to be very lawyerly for a minute, tell you what the statute is. This is its citation. It's 18 USC 3148. That is the federal statute, the federal law that allows for incarceration in advance of trial. So what Jack Smith has done in these papers is not just asking for the gag order to be reinstated in Chutkan's courtroom and to be reinstated immediately. It is asking for his conditions of release to be modified so that if he violates the gag order again in any way, shape, or form, she can send him immediately to jail. For not just even for violating the gag order, okay, but for violating his conditions of release. It is a very big deal. And I have to say that, I went and read, I was familiar with this statute before, but I went and read it again this morning. And it is very, very clear that Trump there's already bases under which, if this statute was a part of his current conditions of release, he would already be in jail. So if you commit a crime, if there's evidence that you've committed a crime while you're on release, and this statute is attached to your conditions of release, you violated it and you go to jail. Crimes: witness intimidation, threatening a prosecutor, jury interference, obstruction of justice. Okay, those are all crimes. Furthermore, if you engage in conduct, and I actually have it I had it open here. Hang on here one second. Let me just pull it up so that I can cite to you guys what it actually says, because I was reading it this morning. Whoops, that's not the one. 3148. One of the things that is also relevant to this is not just that if you've committed a crime, but if essentially how it works is that if there's probable cause to believe that the person has committed a crime. So you don't even have to show that, you don't have to go through the process of showing that he's guilty of that crime. You just have to show there's probable cause for it, and that there's clear and convincing evidence that he violated another condition of his release. So, and it's an or, so it's one or the other. You don't have to do both. So what that means is that, if he has a condition of his release that says you're not allowed to comment outside of the courtroom on any witness, can't even mention their name, and he does that, he goes to jail. So all of this, the way that this works is that the government would initiate a proceeding under this statute once it's attached to his conditions of release. They file a motion with the district court. The judge then issues a warrant for his arrest. And he's charged with violating a condition of his release. And then the person is brought before the judge. So they're arrested, brought in front of the judge in the district where that is pending for a proceeding in accordance with the section. And the person charged with violating the condition of release is then again brought before the judge, and the judge enters a revocation and detention order on the basis of the probable cause or clear and convincing probable cause of committing a crime or clear and convincing evidence that they've violated any other condition or release. And the judge also has to find that there's no condition. Now, this is obvious, but I have to say it. There's no condition or combination of conditions of release that will assure that the person will not flee or pose a danger to the safety or any other person or their community. I mean, that one's obvious, right? Because literally all he has to do is post something on Truth Social and there's threats to kill people as a result of it. All right. And that so it's that, or that the person is unlikely to abide by any condition or combination of conditions of release. I mean, dear Lord, the evidence of that already exists. Now, if this modification is added to his conditions of release and he then goes off at the mouth, like as he has done in New York now, notwithstanding the gag order there, he will go directly to jail. He will be arrested and he will go to jail on motion of the government. So, I mean, again, this does, and you're right, Amy, because this has been an issue. You know, there have been a lot of comments in the last 24 hours about the fact that he does this indirectly, right? It's stochastic terrorism. He says something knowing that it's going to incite somebody else to do something. Or he says to somebody, hey, you go tell that person over there to go kill someone or extort money from them. And then he says, oh, I didn't know anything about that, right? We're way beyond that point if this statute is attached to his release. Okay, so you're right; it is going to cover those kind of conditions, and it would result in his immediate detention. So that is pending, and there is a reply brief due by Sunday. No, I think it's the 28th. So Saturday on this, at which point the judge can either just issue a ruling or can hold a hearing. And my expectation is that probably by Monday, we're going to have the gag order reinstated. Because obviously, one thing that you would recommend if you were a lawyer with a rational client is that the client not violate the conditions of the gag order even while it was suspended. And one of the things that is very key here to the motion that's been filed by Jack Smith is there is a comparable case, actually, that is cited in Jack Smith's brief where a gag order was temporarily lifted and the defendant went out and violated the gag order if it had still been standing, like immediately. And that was a reason for the immediate reinstatement of the gag order and a modification of conditions. So, he's obviously shown that he can't be constrained. And I think that, what's happening in New York is further evidence of that. And, how long he would have to stay in jail would depend on what the judge decided. But it could be anything from a short stay, which I think would scare the living pants off of him, or it could be straight through till trial. There's any number of ways in which that could flow. So keep that in mind as well. All right. So Judge Angoron's situation yesterday. Whew. All right. So I have to say, I got to say before I say this, all right, before we talk about what happened yesterday in New York State, that I'm still seeing a lot of these like super cynical comments on Threads. There's now apparently more than 100 or almost 100 million users on Threads. It's approaching Twitter level usage in just like 4 or 5 months of existing. And one of the things that we've noticed as Twitter has declined even more is that there's now this uptick in like anonymous accounts or accounts that have a name but only have 7 followers. And their jobs seem to be to log on to accounts like mine when they're not posting porn, because that's happening too, and making sure that they're throwing water on every fiery thing that is happening in relation to Donald Trump. This is a tactic of making people depressed and disengaged. And I know that there are people here who are sometimes hopeless. One of the reasons why we're here is that we don't want you to be hopeless, and you shouldn't be hopeless, right? Again, power to the people. Let's not forget. All right. But one of the things that's happening is people are going on there and they're like, nothing's going to stop him, or like, I'm so fed up with this judge. Right. And we have some people in our own community who have said that, this morning. All right. I just have to say something to you though, all right? The way that this is being handled is perfect. Okay. Like actually you kind of couldn't ask for a better roadmap. And I'm going to tell you why. All right. I'm going to tell you why. And I know I talked about this earlier this week, but it's worth repeating. One of the reasons why is that we do not want a risk of an allegation of bias by the judge once Trump is actually found liable or found guilty in a criminal court, such that those determinations can be overturned. People really have to keep their eye on the big picture right now. All right. I know there are people who are like, why doesn't he just throw him in jail already? Because if he just tosses Donald Trump in jail and then he finds Donald Trump guilty, that can be overturned on appeal. All right. So the process has to go in a way that shows that the judge in every instance has given him another, like not another chance, not an endless number of chances, but enough chances that the only thing that can be done, again, I'm going to remind everybody of what's in this code, right? The person is unlikely to abide by any condition or combination of conditions of release other than incarceration. That's what it's about. All right. And if you don't satisfy that, then there's going to be allegations made at the appeal stage that the judge was unduly biased and the conviction or the liability should be tossed. Okay. So people got to get really clear on this. And I have to say that I actually very much agree with how Engoron handled this yesterday. So let's just back up a second and discuss what happened. Michael Cohen's on the stand. He's on the stand again this morning, but Michael Cohen was testifying yesterday. Trump has been having a very hard time containing himself inside and outside of the courtroom as Michael Cohen has told the truth. All right. And that is because Michael Cohen was working for him for like 15 years and knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. And that testimony has been scathing. Okay. There's no question that it like destroys not just the myth of the Trump organization, but it's probably going to be the end of the Trump organization itself and possibly the end of all of Trump's money. All right. He has not been able to control himself. He has been sitting in that courtroom, throwing his hands in the air, making noises. He's been admonished by the judge multiple times about the way that he's behaving in the courtroom. Then on top of it, after a gag order having already been entered about the fact that he had mentioned the judge's clerk, he had claimed the judge's clerk was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend and it was biased. He left after the gag order was entered the first time. He left that post up on his campaign site, okay, to fundraise off of it. And when that was discovered by the judge sanctioned him $5,000. Well, lo and behold, Trump walked out of the courtroom yesterday after more testimony from Michael Cohen and referred to the judge's clerk again and said, this judge is biased and so is the person sitting next to him. Okay. Already been warned, already been fined. Here's what happens when they come back from lunch, or actually I think it was right before lunch. The judge kicked all press out of the courtroom, threw him out, and had a closed door hearing. He called Trump to the stand. Okay. And this was when we knew it was going to get bad, right? He literally stopped the trial and put Trump on the stand and interrogated Trump himself. Put the statement in front of him, said, what did you mean by this? Trump tried to say that he was talking about Michael Cohen when it was very obvious that he wasn't. And Goran said, I find the witness to not be credible. By the way, this is not what you want when the judge is determining the damages in your case and you might be expected to testify on your own behalf. And he sanctioned him $10,000. Okay. Now, if you think that's nothing to Trump, let me just tell you what happened next. Okay. Court is called back. Michael Cohen is on the stand. Trump is so upset. And again, I have to remind you that one of the other things that happened here is Engoron said, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically said, don't do it again. Stop pushing me. And, Engoron has the ability to jail him. 3 strikes and you're out. Okay. We're at the stage now where this is at that level. All right. Trump is so agitated after this happens and the courtroom is called back that literally in the middle of testimony, Trump gets up from the counsel table and storms out of the courtroom with no warning to his lawyers or to the Secret Service, who literally had to chase after him out of the hallway. Okay. So I have to point out to everybody who's like, Trump doesn't care. $10,000 doesn't matter to him. Trump is absolutely a wreck right now. All right. And I was talking about this on Threads yesterday because, there's other people on Threads who've handled some of the bankruptcies related to Trump. And I have to remind everybody, I handled an advocacy. I was on the trial team for an adversary proceeding in the 3rd Trump bankruptcy, where the team that I was on represented a bunch of creditors who were seeking money from Donald Trump. It's not like I have just an observer's viewpoint of this, from like the news media. All right. Like I've literally been on a team that was litigating against Trump and his lawyers. And I will just tell you that there has never been anything like this before. He's terrified and unable to control himself because he is incapacitated by how much the walls are closing in. So, the thing I want people to recognize here is that there's no good way out of this for him, right? There's not going to be any exit strategy that's going to be positive for him in this result. And, I have to also point out that when he is in this state, and we've spent so much time talking about extinction bursts, right? We've spent so much time here talking about narcissistic pathology, actually, and the way in which narcissists respond when they're cornered, because it's not about him being immature. Okay. It's not about him, this is literally about the fact that he is a malignant narcissist who has no self-worth, not low self-worth, not low self-esteem, actually believes that he's nothing, right? He is a profoundly damaged human being. And what happens when narcissists are cornered and they are faced with liability for the first time in their lives is they lash out. They lash out violently. They lash out verbally. They implode. Okay. The reason why I've said this again, for people who have been here before, the reason why the most dangerous time for a partner leaving a malignant narcissist is after they've left is because the malignant narcissist is losing control. That window of time is the time where they're most likely to kill a partner or harm a partner. And we are seeing this at the national level right now because of the fact that every myth about him is being blown to dust. All right. And so you have to expect that he's going to continue acting out in this way. And the end result for him is going to be incarceration. I just need people to kind of grasp, all right, that the backstop of democracy and the backstop of a truly well-functioning judicial system is that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted so that the judge is not accused of bias. Okay. People really need to grasp this in the larger picture of what's happening here. Okay. If a judge, and again, I know there are two systems of justice in this country. I've talked so much about the inherent racism and classism and sexism of the criminal justice system here. Please don't mistake me on this, all right? But in this kind of a case, if the judge does not cross all the T's and dot all the I's, the whole kahuna is at risk, all right? So it's really, really important that people grasp the bigger picture here on all of this. All right. I have to correct one thing that I said actually on Tuesday's broadcast. And I meant to correct this yesterday, but I forgot. We spent some time on Tuesday's broadcast talking about insanity defenses and the way in which some crimes have defenses of insanity to them, like murder or attempted murder. Most do not. We also talked about the capacity of people to assist in their own defense. And when I was talking on Tuesday, I mentioned Mark David Chapman, who shot John Lennon. Who I was thinking about was John Hinckley Jr. And so I made a mistake in that broadcast in terms of who I identified. John Hinckley Jr. was acquitted of attempted murder of Ronald Reagan on the basis of insanity, but he was committed to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. for 40 years as a result. He's out now. He's a diagnosed schizophrenic. And those of you who were alive then, remember that, he claimed that he was doing it to impress Jodie Foster. So that is one example of when we see an acquittal on the basis of insanity. All right. That is not going to happen for Donald Trump. All right. So I just have to remind everybody that I do my very best here to be accurate, and occasionally in spur of the moment, I make a mistake. It's very, very rare, but you can rest assured that I will correct it when I do. If you have not yet liked this broadcast, please hit the like button. We peaked today at close to 700 viewers, at least from what I can see. If you've not yet liked it, you can minimize the chat if you're looking at it on mobile, and you can hit that like button. Please also make sure you're subscribed here. 40% of our viewers every day are not yet subscribers. I don't know why, but subscribe, because apart from anything else, it also helps with the circulation of this really critically important information out to the general public. That's why I'm here. And don't forget to share this also. You can drop a share link through the little arrow below this broadcast into your private group chats for the organizations that you're working with, into private group chats with your friends. And hopefully that will help people to kind of keep their chins up and, stay positive and keep doing the work and focusing on what really matters. I'm just going to say one thing here. One of the things that doesn't matter right now is Melania. I don't really care about Melania. Melania has nothing to do with what's going on right now. All right. So that's it. And I also just want to remind everyone, if you are not yet a paid subscriber on Patreon, our subscription started as little as $2 a month. That's less than 10 cents a broadcast. Okay. They go all the way up to 100. There's lots of perks that go with them. But one of the ways in which we are able to continue doing this work 5 days a week, I'm just going to tell you guys, 4 hours of my working day right now goes into this broadcast, answering questions, researching it, preparing for it. And I also am running a company simultaneously, and we have lots of team on the back end who are doing all the technical stuff, like designing t-shirts for you guys and managing the merch and making sure that we have inclusive sizing and like everything else. All right. The way that those people get paid is through your subscriptions. The way that I feed my family these days in large part is through those subscriptions. So if you like what you're seeing here, please, please, please consider heading on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and becoming a paid subscriber. And then you can ask me questions before every broadcast, and you can join us for Progressive Coffee Hour on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. And, if you're in the upper tiers, you get free t-shirts and stuff, which is really cool. All right. So, mad gratitude to everyone here in our community. I'm so thankful to all of you. Again, I just want to close out by saying woo to our friends in Lewiston and in Maine generally. You're all so very much in my heart today. And I also just want to say, I found out yesterday that I had lost somebody very, very dear to me back in New York, who'd been a friend of mine for 20 years. And, her passing pales in comparison to something like, she passed of cancer. It pales in comparison to the experience of losing someone in a mass shooting, let alone someone young, who is not ready to go. I just want to say that my heart is with you, and I know how much it hurts. And I'm sending you so much love and so much peace and hope that you are surrounded by people who love you in your time of grieving. So grateful to all of you here and for this incredible community of people. I mean, I just love you guys so much. I'm so grateful for everyone here who's doing all the work, for everyone who's been here for so long, and for our new viewers who are just finding this broadcast. You found a great place to be on the internet. I know they're few and far between, but we are a community of love and support who is really full of people trying to make the world a better place. And I hope you'll stick around. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll catch you all tomorrow, regular time. And of course, if there's a need for an emergency broadcast, you'll catch me here this afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye.